everyone, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Spectator Sports. I'm your host, Sebastian Fonseca. We have so much action with the NBA playoffs going in full swing and some interesting stuff going on across the pond with the Premier League. On a serious note, I did want to talk about some politics concerning Sri Lanka. As many of you know, I'm actually from Sri Lanka. My parents immigrated here in the 80s. And I've actually lived there a couple times as well. It holds a great place in my heart, and with the economic crisis going on there, it's been such a travesty. Inflation rates have skyrocketed in the past couple of years, and people have been waiting in lines for hours on end just to get simple necessities like bread and milk. Power being cut for hours on end during the day, and unfortunately that leaves them having their food going bad. It's just a mess going on there, and thankfully a few great people have come up with some charitable links that I'm going to be providing here and also in the description, and I just wanted to bring some awareness to it as well. So any little bit helps, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you. And now getting back into the sports side of the show, the NBA playoffs are now in full swing. The Dallas Mavericks, despite the absence of their superstar Luka Doncic, have actually gone up 2-1, including a road win in Utah Thursday night. Jalen Brunson has picked up the slack from scoring in Luka's absence, and they've gotten some contributions from Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith as well, Dwight Powell, and Maxi Kleber as well. So it proves that those earlier Maverick squads from the past 2 years where Luka has had to just simply carry them, they're more than that now. And imagine with Luka being back, these players have been able to shine despite his absence, and now integrating Luka back into the lineup, which hopefully would be today in Game 4. I would favor the Mavericks going forward in this series. And on the other side of the coin, Utah is now looking at another deficit and potentially another disappointing playoff exit in their recent years. We did detail that in an earlier episode, and I'm going to be providing a link in the description to go check that pit out. But if they end up losing this, especially in a series that Luka Doncic didn't actually play for a significant part, the first head that unfortunately I think has to roll is Coach Quinn Snyder, and they'll probably have to retool the roster as well. I would definitely want to keep Donovan Mitchell by all costs, but Rudy Gobert probably is going to have to be traded for adequate wing defenders in today's NBA. What the Mavericks are doing and other teams like the Los Angeles Clippers did last year was go small, and that forces Gobert to guard players on the perimeter where he doesn't have the foot speed to cut them off on their way to the basket or pulling up for a mid-range jump shot. If the roster may be being retooled, they could maybe be able to make some moves, but they should try to get some adequate value as well. But Utah just seems to be on their way out. They'll need to do something if they want to continue to contend out west. The 76ers are now up 3-0 on the Toronto Raptors, and my take on the Raptors winning in 6 is certainly not looking good, if at all, very bad. I didn't anticipate the injuries, of course, to Scotty Barnes, Gary Trent Jr., and Thaddeus Young, but that's still not an excuse. I'm really big on accountability, and I'm definitely wrong in this circumstance, despite the injuries. The 76ers have really brought it to the Raptors in this series. Game 1, they showed dominance in the paint, utilizing that mismatch with Joel Embiid in the middle, and they've been getting some great contributions from very unlikely faces that you didn't really anticipate in this postseason run. You would think James Harden would provide that second scoring punch to the 76ers, but instead, guys like Tobias Harris and Tyrese Maxey have combined efforts to really pose some threats to Toronto. And I would be very concerned with other teams out east for the future of the 76ers as well. If they are playing like this, where James Harden is not really required to score but still being effective as a facilitator, they're going to be a big problem, and their next potential matchup could be probably the Miami Heat. So that would be a huge concern moving forward. The one slight drawback, however, is definitely Joel Embiid unfortunately suffered a thumb injury, which could be definitely a little bit of concern moving forward. So we just don't know the extent on that, but it seems he's going to play through it, and I'll credit him for that. The Warriors have jumped to a 3-0 lead against the Denver Nuggets. They dominated the 2 games over in San Francisco, winning quite comfortably. And in Game 3, they won what turned out to be more of a nail-biter in Denver. Draymond Green has provided some fantastic defense on Nikola Jokic, where there was an instant where the Nuggets were down 3, and they had a post-up opportunity with Nikola in the post against Draymond, and he held his own. He got a swipe on the ball as Nikola turned towards the basket, got the steal, and it set up to Warriors free throws on the other side, and that pretty much ended the game right then and there. With the Warriors now up 3-0, they might as well just sweep the Nuggets out of the playoffs, or if not close it out in 5. They'll get some pretty important rest for the rest of the series and get Steph a chance to heal up that sore foot that he sustained early on in the season. I have to give a shout out to Jordan Poole. He's come out exceptionally hot in this postseason. He's become their leading scorer, really provided another dimension for the Warriors as well. Originally, we had the Splash Brothers with Klay Thompson and Stephen Curry. Both have been playing ideal basketball in this postseason as well, both shooting very efficiently, providing good scoring outputs as well. But Jordan Poole has been on another level. They end up having essentially the third Splash Brother. I would say it would be good hands for the Warriors moving forward, and they're going to be in good shape for as Steph and Klay head towards the back end of their careers. The Timberwolves and the Grizzlies are a matchup of 2 pretty young teams, with the Grizzlies now up 2-1. The series has been such a massive swing of ups and downs depending on what team you're looking at. The Timberwolves started off very strong in Game 1, starting off with a strong lead and never really looked back, maybe with a couple hiccups, but they hung on to take home court advantage from the jump. And then the Grizzlies came back and routed the Timberwolves in Game 2. And it seemed like they were going to get routed again in Game 3 with the series transitioning to Minneapolis. But in the first quarter, the T-Wolves started off very strong, and then the Grizzlies came back with a counterpunch, cutting the deficit that was once 26 points down to just 7. But that lead was ballooned up once again to 21 going into the fourth. But it turns out the Grizzlies had one last run in them actually closing out the game on a 50-16 run, now taking control of the series and home court advantage moving forward. This seems like really characteristics of young teams where they don't really know how to close out games or provide good stretches of basketball, especially on the defensive end. I saw the T-Wolves taking some weird and bad shots, and this really led to the Grizzlies getting back in transition, getting some easy baskets, and sparking the comeback one last time. Ja Morant had the first playoff triple-double in Grizzlies history, and despite his poor shooting output, he still made impact on the game in other avenues. The Timberwolves' best player as of now is Karl Anthony Towns, and he just came up small again in Game 3, only having 4 shots and 8 points. He was marred by foul trouble, you could say, but his play has not been the best in their last 2 losses, and even in the play-in game against the Los Angeles Clippers earlier. So unless he's able to turn it around, it could be a very short stay for the Timberwolves in the postseason. The Heat are taking on the Atlanta Hawks, and last night the Hawks were able to make this somewhat of a series with Trae Young nailing a floater in the waning seconds. The first 2 games were dominated by Miami in Miami itself. They won pretty comfortably, and they were able to really control the game and contain Trae Young, who was coming off a very good shooting performance against the Cleveland Cavaliers in that play-in game last Friday. But unfortunately for the Hawks, he just hasn't been able to replicate that in the first 2 games, where he's been turning the ball over and having very poor, inefficient shooting nights. He had a better shooting night in Game 3, and he's going to have to get that consistently in Game 4 to make this a series. And I'm really excited to see how this series transpires and plays out. The Bucks and Bulls are 2 division rivals meeting up in this postseason. I initially had the Bucks as heavy favorites going into the series, and they really displayed that in the first half of Game 1. They had a couple scares towards the end of it, but the Bucks were able to hang on. You could say maybe it's the rust for not playing for a week or so, but they got the job done in that game. But they did lay an egg in Game 2, where DeMar DeRozan responded from a poor shooting performance in Game 1 with a playoff career high of 41 points in Game 2, and that actually allowed them to steal home court advantage in the postseason. In Game 3, with the series going back to Chicago, they unfortunately were not able to replicate their Game 2 play, and Milwaukee started off very strong and never looked back. They ended up winning the game by 30-plus points, and this is actually without Chris Middleton, who sprained his MCL in Game 2 and is going to be missing the rest of the series. So despite his absence and Bobby Portis stepping in for him, the Bucks were able to get home court advantage back, and I would still say that this could be a relatively short series just because of the matchups that they have than what they can impose against the Chicago Bulls. So for right now, that prediction of the Milwaukee Bucks in 5s seems to be looking good. The Nets and Celtics have provided very interesting reactions going on. They played 2 games so far, both very competitive. The Nets started off very strong in both games. Game 1, Kyrie had 39 points, really carrying the scoring load with Kevin Durant struggling in that game. Jason Tatum had 31 points of his own, including the game-winning layup as well as time expired. And then they really escaped playing like the most crisp game that they could. But in Game 2, again, the Celtics started off flat with the Nets taking an early lead in the first quarter and building up a pretty good advantage heading into halftime. But the Celtics were able to come back in the second half and really went on a really good run, really containing Kevin Durant in Game 2, where he had the worst shooting half in his postseason career, finishing 0 for 10 from the field. He made a bunch of free throws, but he finished the game on just 4-17 shooting. And it's definitely a concern. This physical play that Boston has provided against Durant has really bothered him. He doesn't look confident in his shots. He's over-dribbling. What's kind of been historically his kryptonite, if there even is any, is when he's shooting, the smaller defenders actually end up playing him better, because the way he shoots from his lower hip and brings it up. So if you swipe at it earlier on the upswing, you can disrupt his shooting motion and get a block or deflection, whatever the case may be. Those notes, Jason Tatum is really doing a great job with containing Durant. Now, it's never really a series until a team wins a game on the road. So with Boston doing what they're supposed to do, winning their home games, the series could still very well end up being competitive with the series shifting to Brooklyn. And with that being starting tonight, I would predict that the Nets will be able to hang on and win Game 3. I don't expect them to go down 0-3, so they'll definitely provide a lot more fire, make some adjustments. Durant is a lot better than he played the first 2 games, and now him being on home court should provide some better play from his part. The Pelicans and Suns just concluded Game 3 last night, with the Suns hanging on and reclaiming home court advantage after giving that up in Game 2. Playing the series now without their star guard, Devin Booker, and he unfortunately sustained a hamstring injury in Game 2 after a very brilliant performance, I must say. And now he's out for 2 to 3 weeks with this left hamstring strain. And it's going to put some questions, obviously, in the Suns moving forward, but thankfully they have Chris Paul. They have some very talented pieces surrounding them, and I think they still have enough firepower to get by the Pelicans. Chris Paul was really mastering the pick-and-roll play, rolling DeAndre Ayton to good looks at the basket, with providing him a playoff career high of 28 points and 17 rebounds last night. And they seem to have an advantage on the boards and inside big men play. Of course, Jackson Hayes' ejection didn't really help, and that kind of softened the coverage that they had, leaving really just Jonas Valanciunas to guard DeAndre Ayton. But the Suns still have some good matchups, despite the Pelicans having some scorers like Brandon Ingram at their disposal. But like I said, the Suns have more firepower, and I still expect them to win this series and hopefully get Devin Booker back for the conference semifinals moving forward. Now jumping across the pond to the Premier League, Arsenal picked up a crucial win against their London rival Chelsea. It was a pretty wild game. It was a back and forth affair in the first half, with Arsenal starting off scoring, Chelsea replying, Arsenal taking 2-1 lead, and then Chelsea coming right back, tying it just before halftime. They were able to come out with a stronger attack for Arsenal in the second half, providing a 3-2 lead, and they got another goal towards the end of the game, which I thought was kind of a fluky penalty. It seemed like the Arsenal player dragged the Chelsea defender to the ground in the box, but despite VAR review, they still awarded Arsenal a penalty kick, so that does help them with the goal differential output as well, and their Champions League hopes are still very much alive. Tottenham and Manchester United are also playing as well for that fourth spot, so it remains to be seen exactly how that's going to transpire, but it's going to be a very exciting end to the Premier League season. Liverpool and Manchester City both got some wins midweek, so it still stands with City a point ahead of Liverpool in the standings, but with a few games left, it seems like the team who drops points is going to end up actually losing the title. So they both have favorable matchups, but of course it is the Premier League, and any team can force miscues or mistakes on the best of teams, and it only takes one match or a bad day at the office to really blow a title. Chelsea seems pretty adamant on maintaining their third place position. They can't really move up, and it would take kind of a massive collapse for them to lose their third spot or be knocked out of Champions League entirely. Tuchel has played some interesting lineups, especially against Arsenal last week, but they'll need to really work on getting a consistent lineup and closing out the season strong to keep their Champions League spot. FA Cup semi-final action was last Saturday, with City and Liverpool clashing for the second time in 6 days. And Liverpool started up very strong, jumping all over City 3-0 to start, with a couple gas from U.S. men's goalie Zach Steffen. Unfortunately, he took some very strange tactics in defending the goal, and that led to two pretty crucial goals for Liverpool. City was able to come back and cut that deficit to 1 goal in the waning minutes, but with that being a stoppage time goal, there just wasn't enough time to really keep that going, unfortunately. And on the other side of the bracket, Crystal Palace played Chelsea, and Chelsea ran out to a very comfortable 2-0 win, setting up a final matchup in the FA Cup between Liverpool and Chelsea once again. Liverpool drew twice against Chelsea in the Premier League, but they did win the Carabao Cup final earlier this year, so let's see if Chelsea can get some revenge and win the FA Cup next month in May. And that's it for today's episode of Spectator Sports. Thank you so much for tuning in. I just wanted to let everybody know that I'll be heading to Europe next week, so I'm going to be a little bit slow on posting content, but with the NFL draft and more NBA playoff action going on, I'm still going to be posting some episodes for sure. It's just a matter of editing them and posting them on the page, but please stay tuned. And if you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button as well. Hit the bell for notifications when I post new content. And as usual, please feel free to comment with your takes as well. Thanks. I'll see you again next time. Take care.